year was 1902, and two brothers from Dayton, Ohio, were about to change the world. Wilbur and Orville Wright had spent years studying flight, building gliders, conducting experiments in homemade wind tunnels. They had solved the fundamental problems of control and stability that had defeated all other inventors. They had the perfect design for a functional airplane, but they had a gigantic problem. They needed an engine, not just any engine. They needed something that generated at least 8 horsepower, that weighed less than 200 pounds, and that was reliable enough not to fail at the crucial moment of takeoff. They searched everywhere. They wrote letters to engine manufacturers across the country. They visited workshops. They consulted catalogs. The answer was always the same: impossible. The gasoline engines of the era were heavy, designed for automobiles and boats. An engine with the power the Wrights needed would easily weigh 300 or 400 pounds. Too heavy to fly. The lighter engines were too weak. It was a technological dead end. Other inventors had faced the same problem and given up. Samuel Langley, the respected Smithsonian scientist with massive government funding, had built an elaborate airplane that crashed twice at launch, despite having a powerful engine, because the aircraft and launch setup failed him. The challenge seemed insurmountable. Langley had money, prestige, and a powerful engine, but he didn't have what the Wrights had already mastered: control. His failures weren't just about power, they were about stability, steering, and the brutal reality that an aircraft must be flyable, not merely launchable. The Wright brothers sat in their bicycle shop in Dayton and faced reality. If they wanted to fly, they would have to build their own engine, and they had no idea how to do it, but they knew someone who did. Charles Edward Taylor did not look like a hero. He was 34 years old in 1902, a mechanic in the Wrights' bicycle shop, and had never designed an engine in his life. He was a quiet man with enormous, skilled hands who preferred working with tools to talking with people. Taylor moved to Dayton in 1897, but he joined the Wrights' shop in 1901, while the brothers were still running their bicycle shop. He was good with his hands, precise, careful, the type of mechanic who could build almost anything if you gave him time and tools. The Wrights trusted him completely, so much so that when they decided to dedicate themselves to the problem of flight, they left him in charge of the bicycle business while they experimented. But now they needed more than a shop manager. They needed an engine engineer. And Taylor was all they had. In the winter of 1902, Wilbur and Orville sat down with Charlie, as they called him, and explained the problem. They needed an engine that generated at least 8 horsepower, that weighed less than 200 pounds, and they needed it fast. They had plans to return to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the following season. That gave them approximately 6 weeks. 6 weeks to design and build from scratch an engine that the entire industry said was impossible. Charlie Taylor listened in silence, nodded his head, and said something like, "I suppose we can try." What followed was one of the most impressive and least celebrated engineering achievements in history. Charlie Taylor, working mostly alone in the small workshop behind the bicycle shop, designed and built a fully functional internal combustion engine in exactly 6 weeks. He had no formal blueprints. He had no engineering training. He had no specialized tools or precision machinery. He had a basic lathe, hand drills, files, hammers, and his own incredibly skilled hands. The design he created was elegantly simple. It would be a 4-cylinder inline engine, water-cooled, gasoline-fed. The cylinders would be cast iron. The engine's crankcase would be cast aluminum, with separate iron cylinders bolted on. Aluminum was relatively new in 1902, expensive and difficult to work with. But Taylor knew it was the only way to reach the target weight. He designed a lightweight aluminum crankcase and kept the rest as simple and light as possible. He calculated the necessary dimensions for the piston stroke and cylinder diameter. Then, with help from the Wright brothers for some of the more complex mathematical calculations, he began fabricating each piece individually. He cast the aluminum crankcase at a local foundry, personally supervising the process to ensure quality. He machined the iron cylinders on his lathe, constantly measuring, adjusting, perfecting. He fabricated the pistons, the connecting rods, the crankshaft. Each piece had to be made by hand, manually adjusted, individually tested. There were no production lines. There were no interchangeable parts purchased from suppliers. Charlie Taylor was literally creating each component from scratch, converting raw metal into a functional engine through pure manual skill. The fuel system was another challenge. There was no carburetor as we know it today. Gasoline was gravity-fed into a shallow chamber in the intake. It was primitive but effective. For ignition, they started with dry batteries, then switched to a magneto, using contact points inside the combustion chamber rather than spark plugs. The cooling system was a simple water circuit with a small radiator. Each system was designed with a singular objective: minimum weight, maximum reliability. While Taylor worked day and night on the engine, the Wright brothers refined the Flyer's design. They calculated weight and balance. They designed the propellers, another monumental technical challenge they solved using wing design principles applied to rotating surfaces. And those propellers weren't powered like anything the world had seen. The Flyer used two propellers driven by bicycle-style chains, straight out of the brothers' own past, and they made the propellers spin in opposite directions to cancel torque, so the aircraft wouldn't twist itself out of the sky. It was elegant, practical, and unmistakably right. Bicycle logic applied to the edge of human possibility. Everything depended on the engine. Without it, the Flyer was just wood and fabric. With it, it could be the machine that would change human history. As the weeks passed, the engine took shape. Taylor worked long hours, often until late at night, with only the light of kerosene lamps. Metal shavings accumulated on the workshop floor. The smell of cutting oil and hot metal filled the air. Finally, after exactly 6 weeks of intense work, the engine was complete. It weighed about 180 pounds, safely under their 200-pound limit. It generated 12 horsepower in the first tests, 50% more powerful than required. It was in all aspects a triumph of engineering, and it had been achieved by a self-taught mechanic with basic tools in a small bicycle shop in Ohio. The Wrights were amazed. They tested it repeatedly in the workshop, mounted on an improvised test bench. The engine roared smoothly, running at around 1,000 revolutions per minute. It was reliable, powerful, and light enough. They had their engine. Now they could attempt to fly. In September of 1903, the Wright brothers carefully packed the disassembled Flyer, Taylor's engine, and all their tools and traveled to Kitty Hawk. Charlie Taylor stayed in Dayton, watching over the bicycle shop, ensuring the business kept running. He was not invited to witness the flight attempt. The Wrights had limited resources and someone had to stay. Taylor accepted this without complaint, as he accepted everything. He had done his job. The rest depended on the brothers. At Kitty Hawk, the Wrights assembled the Flyer. They mounted Taylor's engine on the frame, connected the transmission chains to the propellers, and checked each connection. The engine worked perfectly in initial tests, but there were problems. A propeller shaft cracked under torque. The drive shafts were sent back to Dayton for repair, and the brothers even returned briefly to Dayton to repair them. Weeks passed. The weather turned colder. December arrived with freezing winds from the Atlantic. On December 14th, they made their first attempt. Wilbur piloted. The Flyer took off briefly but crashed after only 3 seconds. Minor damage, nothing serious, but another delay for repairs. Finally, on December 17, 1903, with cold winds blowing across the sand dunes, they were ready again. This time Orville would pilot. At 10:35 in the morning, with 5 witnesses present, Orville lay down on the lower wing, grabbed the controls and signaled he was ready. Charlie Taylor's engine roared to life. The Flyer began sliding down the launch rail. It gained speed, and then, incredibly, it left the ground. Orville flew 120 feet in 12 seconds. It was not far, it was not high, but it was a controlled, sustained, powered flight. It was a real flight. They made 3 more flights that day. The last, piloted by Wilbur, covered 852 feet in 59 seconds. There was no doubt they had conquered the air. And then, almost as if the dunes demanded payment for that victory, nature struck back. After the final flight, a sudden gust caught the Flyer, flipped it, and battered it badly, a brutal reminder of how fragile the breakthrough still was. In that chaos, witness John Daniels, the man who snapped the famous photograph, was thrown into the wreckage as it tumbled. The world remembers the triumph in that image. but the wreckage right after it tells the other half of the story. And it had all been made possible by the 180-pound engine that a quiet mechanic had built with his hands in 6 weeks. When news of the first flight finally spread, the world celebrated Wilbur and Orville Wright as geniuses, pioneers, conquerors of the air. Deservedly so, because their courage, vision, and technical genius had made flight possible. But almost nobody mentioned Charlie Taylor. He was not at Kitty Hawk that historic day. There were no photographers capturing his image. He did not write articles about his contribution. He was just the shop mechanic, the guy who fixed bicycles and casually had built the engine that changed human history. Taylor continued working for the Wrights for years, helping to build improved engines for later models of the Flyer. He wasn't just the man who built the first engine, he became the mechanical backbone of the Wright operation, solving day-to-day failures, fixes, and refinements that kept the early machines alive. When the Wrights established their airplane manufacturing company, Taylor was there, building engines, training other mechanics, solving problems. But he never sought recognition. He never gave lectures. He rarely gave interviews. He was a man who let his work speak for him, and in an era that adored famous inventors and scientific celebrities, silent work rarely received attention. The Wrights themselves recognized his crucial contribution. In private letters and conversations, they always gave Charlie credit for making the first flight possible. Orville later wrote that without Taylor's mechanical genius, they never would have flown in 1903. But the public did not hear those private acknowledgments. History books told the story of the Wright brothers. Statues and monuments honored Wilbur and Orville. Charlie Taylor, the man who literally built the heart of the first airplane, was a footnote, if that. Charlie Taylor's later life was as quiet as his moment of genius had been. He continued working with the Wrights until the company finally closed. Then he spent years in various mechanical jobs, never making much money, never seeking fame. In his later years, as aviation became a massive global industry, jet planes crossed continents and men prepared to go to the moon, Charlie Taylor lived modestly, almost forgotten. Finally, in the 1950s, some aviation historians began to recognize his crucial contribution. He was belatedly honored by the aeronautical industry. He received recognition from aviation organizations. But by then, he was an old man, and the recognition came too late to change his life. Charlie Taylor died in 1956 at 88 years old, having lived long enough to see aviation completely transform the world. But he died without the fame or fortune that his historic contribution should have guaranteed. The story of Charlie Taylor teaches us something uncomfortable about how we remember history and whom we celebrate. We adore the visionaries, those who have brilliant ideas, those who are at the front when glory arrives. And we should. The Wright brothers deserve every tribute they receive. Their genius made human flight possible, but we forget people like Charlie Taylor, those who turn visions into reality, those who get their hands dirty, those who solve the impossible practical problems that stand between dreams and achievements. Without Charlie Taylor, the Wright brothers would have been just two more dreamers with impressive designs on paper and no way to make them fly. Without his extraordinary mechanical skill, without his ability to build the impossible with simple tools, without his 6 weeks of brutal work creating an engine from scratch, there would have been no flight in 1903. The first airplane needed 3 geniuses to fly. Wilbur Wright for the vision and design, Orville Wright for the courage and execution, and Charlie Taylor to convert raw metal into the mechanical heart that made everything else possible. But only 2 of those names are remembered. Only 2 have monuments. Only 2 are taught in schools. Today, when you see an airplane crossing the sky, when you board a flight, when you think about how aviation transformed our world, remember that it all began in a small workshop in Dayton, Ohio. Remember 2 brilliant brothers who refused to accept that human flight was impossible. But also remember a quiet mechanic who, in 6 weeks, with basic tools and pure skill, built the engine that changed history. Charles Edward Taylor, the man who built the heart of the first airplane, the invisible hero of the first flight, the mechanical genius without whom the Wrights never would have left the ground. His name deserves to be remembered alongside the brothers he made fly. Because without Charlie Taylor, there was no first flight. And yet, almost nobody remembers his name. That is the silent tragedy behind one of humanity's greatest triumphs. The man who made it possible was forgotten by the history he helped create. But now you know his name, Charles E. Taylor. The mechanic who built the engine that taught humanity to fly. Today, aviation finally speaks his name out loud. The FAA's Charles Taylor Master Mechanic Award honors the kind of quiet excellence he embodied: precision, endurance, and craft. In many ways, he is often remembered as the first aviation mechanic, the man who proved that history doesn't only belong to dreamers, but to the hands that make the dream real. Don't forget it.